In this video, I'm going to share with you my entire process for creating a pet portrait, from initial idea to finished painting. People think painting a pet portrait is just about capturing their likeness. But what if there's more? If only I'd known when I started what really goes into capturing their spirit, the small techniques and the careful choices that make them come alive on the canvas. Today, I'm sharing the things that I wish I'd known from the beginning. These aren't just tips for painting fur or getting the details right. They're the lessons that make a difference in bringing a beloved pet's personality to life. Hey, and welcome to the latest video. I am halfway through a picture. Well, actually, I'm just right at the beginning of a pet portrait, and I thought I would use this video to explain a little bit more about my pet portrait process. Got my little notebook here with all the little things that I want to say. I'm doing this video because my approach to painting pet portraits and what I see as a good pet portrait has changed. So I thought I would share with you how I create my new style of pet portraits and some of the thoughts that have gone into that and why I've made the decision to make different styles of pet portraits. So the general sort of starting point of all of my pet portraits is the same. I will get a brief from a potential client. So I got an email saying they wanted a commission of a kitten, and they sent me through a load of photos, and I used those photos to create a mock-up. And I use Procreate on my iPad Pro to create those mock-ups. I will then send those mock-ups to the client and get okayed with, yeah, it's great, or can we make some adjustments until we are finally happy. So here are some of the mock-ups that I did. This is the one that we settled on, and the client asked if we could make some changes to it, which I'm going to do in the final painting. Once I've got the mock-up and everything's been okayed by the customer, I will then start the painting process. And from this point, this is where my entire process has changed. So I'm starting the process with a sketch on the canvas, and I will either project this or use the grid method, whichever I feel more comfortable using at that time for that particular piece. I used to just jump straight in, copy the reference photo, and yeah, it's just completely gone out the window. I'm now treating these pet portraits exactly the same as I would be treating a $10,000 original. I'm really starting to try to take my time a little bit more with my paintings. I was always like trying to rush them, trying to push out as many paintings as I possibly could in a short amount of time. But as I want my paintings to develop and what I see my paintings being, they need to take time. So I'm applying that to my pet portraits as well as my originals. So the next step of my process is to do a quick sort of underpainting, and I'll do this in one colour. For this piece, and this is the stage that you're seeing here, that was done in a burnt sienna acrylic paint. So I've just blocked in a little bit of the background, I have blocked in some of the details on the kitten itself, and I've just sort of created a little bit of composition showing where the lights and the shadows are going to be. And I actually really like it at this stage. And the thing that I like about it at the moment is the subtlety in these shadows, but then you've got these like bright highlights here that like really force this like backlit glow and force your eye onto the kitten and then up to the butterfly, which is also going to have some of this glow to it when I paint it in later on. I don't want to lose that in the painting, so I'm going to try and keep this sort of glow throughout every stage of this painting process. And I don't normally do that, so that's going to be different and a challenge for this particular painting. But hopefully it will work out okay in the end. So for the next stage of this portrait, I will actually rely on my reference photo relatively heavily. This is where I want to sort of be looking at the reference photo and studying it and making sure that I'm actually getting a likeness of the animal themselves. so I don't want to be pulling away from my reference photo too early. I'm going to use acrylics to put down a coloured base layer over this. Just a first initial layer to get some of the background in and some of the colours on the kitten. I'm trying to be a little bit more painterly with my work, even my pet portraits, and more thoughtful about my approach to applying paint. These initial layers are about getting the shapes and the values right. It's not about getting the colours or the tiny little details absolutely bang on. I probably went a little bit overboard with this first run at the painting, but I am trying to treat each piece as if it could be the final visible layer of the painting. I used to cover up every single part of the painting with each new layer, but I'm trying to let the painting evolve more naturally rather than solely thinking about replicating a photo, which means being much more mindful about these initial layers, as much more of it is going to be visible in the final painting. So I've got the first layer of the cat finished, and I went a little bit more detailed than I probably should have done for an underpainting. Like, this could be the finished layer, or near enough the finished layer. I've got some plans for this that I'm not quite 100% on, like where I'm going to go with it. Now, the next step is to get rid of some of this orange and put the background in. As I said, what I want from a pet portrait has changed. I used to see them as sort of, you get your photograph and you copy your photograph exactly, trying to make it look like the photograph that they liked. And I just don't think, for me personally, that is the way that I want to paint anymore. I don't want to be just copying a reference photo exactly, because you may as well just have a photograph, if that's going to be the case. I want to be a little bit more stylised with my work, and I don't mean abstract, and I don't mean impressionistic, and I don't mean not realistic. I still want to paint realistically. I still want to paint so it looks alive and it looks real, but I don't want to be copying that reference photo exactly. I want to be adding more than the photograph. So that's what I'm trying to do with my pet portraits as well. I'm trying to treat them exactly the same as I would do my original wildlife paintings. So instead of creating just a straight up copy of a reference photo with maybe like the background adjusted, I want to try and create paintings that tell a little bit more of a story, that include a little bit more of the character of the pet that I'm trying to create. So that's what we've done with this piece. We've got the kitten. It's not just going to be a copy of that reference photo. We've got the kitten and playfully trying to catch a butterfly in the top corner. The background isn't going to be a realistic background. It's going to be a little bit more masculine, I would say. It's a little bit more abstract. It's going to be a little bit more sort of like blocky and industrial, because the customer with this piece didn't want the painting looking too feminine. I like to add this sort of like tuft of lights in the highlights, almost like blending into the background to give like this glare effect. I feel like it gives a bit more of a glow to the edges of the subject. So I'm pretty much done with this stage of the painting process. I've painted the sides of the canvas because this one's not being sent framed, so I've had to paint the sides to match the rest of the picture. I was originally going to do the layer of oils over the cat. Like, that was my initial plan, but I really like the brushwork that I've achieved with the acrylics. I was going to go a little bit softer and a little bit more real with the oils, but I love how the acrylics have sort of like brought this little bit of life and a little bit of movement and like a real lot of fluff to the cat. So I'm not actually sure yet whether I'm going to put the oil layer over the top. But things that I need to do next before I even get onto that are lighten this up a little bit with some white and a little bit of airbrushing, just to add a little bit more atmosphere and depth to the picture. So I will let you know how that goes and come back to you and think about what we're going to do after that. So I've done a little bit more to the cat. I've done some airbrushing. I've softened up the fur here. I've put a little bit of a white vignette towards the edges, which I think just focuses you a little bit more on the kitten itself. And now what I've got to do is work on the butterfly. Once that's done, I'm going to send a picture to the client, just because I really like this painting and how it's turned out so far, but I am thinking it is just a touch feminine maybe. I'm gonna add a little bit more grunge with the palette knife just in these lighter areas, just to lighten it up a little bit, and maybe just do a little bit of a wash of a bit more neutral grey. But once that's done, I'm gonna send a photo and hopefully the client likes it. Anyway, before that, I've got to get that butterfly painted and do all those things I just said. So let's get to it. I lost a bit of that vibrancy when I was adding some layers to the butterfly, so I needed to bring some of that back first before I could start painting the details. And I'm not really going overboard with the details on this butterfly. It doesn't need to look super realistic. It's only secondary to the kitten, but I still want it to be a prominent feature of the painting, so it's going to be in more detail than the background, which means putting in these tiny little highlights and antennae. Then the final step for this painting is adding the whiskers, and this is always scary, especially with whiskers like this one that are going over like the eyes and other parts of the painting that I've spent so long working on. It's been almost a month since I started this piece and it is finally done, and I am over the moon with how it's turned out. I genuinely do not believe I've ever done a better pet portrait, or at least one that I really like. This is probably the favourite pet portrait I've ever done, and it's actually inspired a whole new style of acrylic painting for me, which I cannot wait to get stuck into. All I've got to do now is get this girl packaged up and then sent off to a new home. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found the video interesting, and I'll see you next time.